Hi there, I'm Jeff Barr. Today I'm speaking with Nathan Thomas, General Manager of Amazon WorkSpaces. How's it going today?
Doing all right, Jeff. Nice to see you again.
Likewise. Tell me a bit about Amazon WorkSpaces.
Yeah, Amazon Workspaces are desktops that you can connect to in the cloud. So very simply, the same kind of desktop you're used to using, a Windows desktop, a Linux desktop, but you take another device like an iPad or an Android tablet or a MacBook, and you connect to your workspace over the internet. And so you use it just like you would any other desktop.
I've been a long-time user of WorkSpaces, of course, as you know. I think I was on the earliest beta. I've certainly enjoyed watching the progress over the last couple years. What are some of the features that our customers really appreciate?
Yeah, so a few different things. First off is that ability to connect from any device, anywhere. So you've got any kind of end users who you need to connect from. So you've got, again, iPad, Android devices, you've got MacBooks, Windows devices, thin clients, zero clients, whatever it is you have, you can connect to your workspace. So they love that. And then the workspaces themselves are really designed to be very high performance. So the way that you interact with your workspace feels very natural. So the same apps that you're used to running on Windows or Linux run the same way, and everything feels just the same, except that you're connecting to it in the cloud from a distance, which means that it's very controllable for corporate environments. It's very secure. It's something that, from a company's perspective, is a lot more manageable.
I know when I speak to our customers that security is actually a real big attraction. The fact that the vital corporate information is there in the cloud. It's not scattered out over across a bunch of laptops that are here, there, and everywhere that might be stolen or lost or broken.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the biggest things for customers. They get very concerned about the idea that all of that corporate data goes on a laptop or on a device and out the door every day. I think we're going to look back in a number of years and think that sounds a little crazy. Even with encryption, you get pretty scared about what is that data and where did it go and what happened to it. Whereas with Workspaces, it never leaves, right? You just put it in the cloud, and that workspace that's running inside of AWS has all of the access that it needs to the other data inside of AWS. And then when you're done with it, you close your local device, and nothing is ever transitioned or stored on that local device. So you could lose it, or it could get compromised, and it doesn't matter to you as a company.
So when you say that we have access to other data stored in AWS, does that mean our customers are sometimes using Workspaces and they're connecting up to other data sources or other applications, or how do they use it?
Absolutely. So Workspaces running inside of your environment in AWS is a core part of the value. So Workspace, when it's launched, you have the opportunity to attach a virtual interface into your VPC. So that means you control the security groups and the access to it. And so if you want to have access to your intranet and be able to access resources like SharePoint sites internally to your network, you can do that. If you want to have access to your Active Directory, we can do domain join directly to Active Directory. If you want to have access to all of your other S3 buckets or other resources that are running inside of AWS, you can do all of that. And so the workspace becomes kind of the central hub of access and control for the company's employees to get at all of the other pieces that they do their jobs with.
Okay, so you mentioned security a bit. I think that hub model probably is one factor. What are the other aspects of security that Workspaces helps our customers with?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. So the workspaces themselves, of course, are designed to be highly secure. And so that really is about a couple of big ideas. So first off, again, no data that's ever stored locally on the client devices. So it's only a video stream, effectively, of your interaction with the desktop. The authentication and connection into that workspace is another element. So all of that is TLS encrypted. So we're never transmitting any of the credentials or login information in the clear. And then there's the active streaming session. So you want to make sure that all of the stream, that video, is protected. That's all AES 256 encrypted. And so there's no way anybody's getting access to the video stream of your desktop. And of course, there's the data in your workspace. So it's all encrypted on EBS at rest. You have the option to select that. And so even when you're not connected or not using your workspace, that data is encrypted so that nobody can get access to it. And then, of course, all the other standard AWS security components apply. Again, security groups and VPC rules for network controls. So when a workspace is launched, unless you decide you want it to be, it is not publicly connectable from the networks. So that is, it's not like somebody could log into your workspace or connect to your workspace over the intranet so that your data is exposed. You have to connect from the client, and the client has a gateway on the front of it so that it doesn't have direct access to the workspace. So I've really thought about how do we keep that company's information protected in there.
What other AWS features do customers typically use? Like things like, you mentioned VPCs. How about things like Direct Connect? Is that a useful adjunct to Workspaces?
Absolutely. So customers are launching Workspaces inside of their VPC. They've got that virtual interface published to their VPC. A lot of customers are routing the traffic over their DX links. And so that can be streaming traffic and video, or that can actually just be the access back to a corporate network on site for Direct Connect. So very, very common in that regard.
What is the getting started process? How do our customers go from they're not a WorkSpaces customer to getting up and running and being super productive in the cloud?
There's a couple of different answers there. So if you just want to get started, as you know, Jeff, if you just want to go launch a workspace, go to the AWS console and you can enter your credentials, log in, and then launch a workspace in 10 or 15 minutes. So you just select which type of workspace you want, Windows or Linux, whether you want Windows 7 or Windows 10, or if you want a particular version of Linux, and then launch it. And then you can connect to it by downloading the client, which you'll get a link to, and then there's a registration code, and you set your password, and you log in. That's sort of the easy way to get going with it as an individual or a small group. For bigger companies, their first process is typically to go ahead and domain join the workspaces to their Active Directory and do some configuration on their own images. And so there's a process that customers go through to kind of stand up, set the VPC rules, set the networking, access to the Active Directory, and then potentially using a capability we call bring your own license to import their own Windows Client OS images. So there's a little more work that those companies go through, but that could be a 2, 3, 4 week journey of kind of getting all the approvals in place, getting it all stood up, and then having your end users up and running with Workspaces.
After they've done this, then they're ready to just deploy at scale, though.
Yeah. So at that point, you just spin up as many Workspaces as you need, and you're typically taking, again, 10, 15, 20 minutes to stand up a new workspace for a new employee. And then whenever a Workspaces user connects to their workspace, typically 5 to 10 second login times if it's an always-on workspace, or more like 90 to 120 seconds connections for auto-stop workspaces, which are workspaces that shut down when you're not using them to save some money.
I actually love that concept of the auto start or auto stop. I forgot
Auto stop.
just told me.
Yeah,
Okay.
auto stop.
Yeah,
Just like
the
your
auto
car.
stop.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this kind of virtual concept where it's only there when I'm looking at it in this interesting kind of
That's right.
cosmic sense.
The workspaces, when you're not using them, will kind of measure a period of time. Minimum is about an hour, and then maximum is, I think, more than a day. And so as an administrator, you set what that time is. When you're not using it, you're disconnected from it. Eventually, it will hibernate that workspace for the auto stop. And so that's really cool because it means we stop billing you for the hourly usage of that workspace, which is nice. But what's really awesome is it actually saves all of the applications in the same state that they were running in and all of the data. So the next time you log in after it's been hibernated, it recovers that hibernation. All of your apps are up and running just like they were. All of your data is accessible. And so all that state is there and you get productive immediately.
So this is just like closing the lid on my laptop
It's
then.
exactly the same thing. It's literally the same way that it functions under the covers from a technology perspective. And so customers just love that ability to save the money but still get that experience. And to be clear, that idea of that longer login that first time when we do the hibernate recovery, that's only until it hibernates again. So for most customers, they find they come in at 9 a.m. in the morning, they log in the first time, they get that little longer one, and then every login throughout the day is still a fast 5 to 10 second login time.
So I'm sure that some customers use that feature as a cost-saving measure, but it also seems to me to probably open up new use cases where you just really need a workspace, maybe a couple hours a week or maybe just a few hours a month.
Yeah, entirely true. So what we found is that economically, if you're using a workspace less than about 80 hours a month, then AutoStop is cheaper. And we have a lot of customers who use workspaces for 1 hour, 2 hours, and then up through 10 or 20. In fact, every time we talk to customers, they're kind of surprised when they look at their usage to discover how many of their internal staff don't use their workspace more than 80 hours a month. And I don't think that's anything negative about their staff. It's just reality is how often do everybody sit at their desks for 8 hours a day. A lot of employees aren't that way. And so workspaces that auto stop wind up being about half of our usage because it just makes sense economically for that to be the way that they get used.
How does Workspaces help our customers that have a global employee base?
Workspaces is available in 12 regions across the globe, so the AWS regions, and customers can deploy the workspaces in the region that makes sense for them, so it's closest to them or has the best latency characteristics to reach, or their data is there, so the other AWS assets and the things that they're using for other AWS services might be in those regions. And so it's great for them in that they get to manage globally, but it's all just sort of one object in the cloud. So you've got workspaces, and they're all kind of the same thing. So it's really nice for centralized IT organizations with global operations. They don't have to deploy and manage and keep up with laptops across the world. A good example of that for us is a customer out of the Mall Shine who does video production. And so they have to stand up video production crews across the globe rapidly. In the past, they would hand out laptops to those guys. And I mean, by hand out, ship them laptops. And so they had to stand those up, get them configured, and then get them back at the end of the shoot and make sure that they were able to recover those assets. With Workspaces, they just tell those video crews to stand up their own local laptops and networking and connect to the workspace. So from the central IT perspective, they just have to issue a new workspace, provision it, and then when they're done, shut it down and walk away. So it's really nice when you've got big global operations to have that flexibility.
I know for me, one of the interesting kind of paradigm shifts is that when you're carrying around your laptop, you're always worried about something, about losing it, or it's being stolen, or you drop it and you lose all your precious data. And there's almost a subconscious worry all the time about you carrying around this volatile information for you, with you.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's all in the cloud. And the idea of connecting versus using, and you're just connecting up to the cloud, it's always there.
Yeah.
You know that AWS is actually keeping everything safe and secure and up and running. It's a gigantic mental relief, actually. It is a
mental relief. I talk about this occasionally. For me, one of the biggest reasons I love my workspace is I don't carry a laptop back and forth to home anymore. Now I'm in the nice position that I've got my own personal laptop, and Amazon has given me a laptop, and so I have one at my desk at work and one at home, and I just connect to my workspace from either. And so now I don't carry a backpack anymore. And so we talked to a lot of people in companies who are bicycle riders and things, and they just love the fact that they can do that and not have to lug around this clunky, heavy object every day.
Exactly. So at home, I've got my personal desktop, and then at the office, I've got a Zero client, which is this nice, tiny little device with no hard drive, no fan, and very, very pleasant way to connect up to the workspace.
Yeah, absolutely. The Zero clients have been absolutely just a real revelation for a lot of ways. Zero clients, thin clients in general. We use them at reInvent in Las Vegas every year to set up all of the labs for our training. And so there are 3 and 4 or 5 of these big labs with 300 or 400 of these environments in them apiece. And I recall the first year, the folks who set up that room saying that the room was too cold because they had built the room assuming that they would have these physical machines in them that generate heat and all the fan noise. And you walk into this room and it was no heat getting generated.
Oh, I remember that room.
Quiet.
I remember that room. That was to me one of the first big kind of deployments I personally saw of workspaces, and kind of neat to know how many workspaces we could run over a single connection as well.
Yeah, so we were able to stand up hundreds, and of course we did it again this year for 2018, and I don't remember the counts now, but well into the thousands of workspaces. And I think the coolest thing about that is we don't really even talk to those guys. They just go and stand it up. And that's really the promise of workspaces, is for companies, they have this opportunity when they have an acquisition they need to do, when they've got training that they need to do, or when they're standing up a new remote office, that they can just go provision workspaces relatively quickly, I mean days, rather than in the past having to go procure laptops, order them, image them, distribute them, manage them. So it's just a very liberating thing from a business perspective.
Yeah. Just the number of use cases you can think of, just all the temporary, the short term, the things that just show up with no warning, an emergency response, and you say we need to be able to put workspaces in place for 1,000 people really quickly. Well, you can do that really easily here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do it all the time, actually. And I without getting into naming names, we've had a bunch of customers who've had either exploits that have had issues, or we've seen disaster scenarios. So we had a major company scale up because their disaster center was in Houston, and Houston got hit by a hurricane. They needed to stand up an alternative to that. And we love those use cases. They may go away after a month, but that's exactly why you're doing this in the cloud, is you don't have to own any of that stuff. So when you're done with it, you turn it off and you walk away, and that's great.
Is there a number you can share that you would think of as kind of a large-scale workspaces deployment within a customer?
Yeah. So if you were talking about anything over 10,000, we'd start to say that's getting to be pretty large. We have a lot of customers running thousands and thousands of workspaces. So generically, we tend to talk about the fact that we've got tens of thousands of customers running hundreds of thousands of workspaces. So it's a pretty big pool at this point. We've got a lot of desktops. And part of what is exciting about that compared to traditional virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI, is that those are real users. So we don't have a lot of vaporware, shelfware, people spin up a workspace and never use it because they're paying for it by the month, right? So they're going to shut it down when they don't use it. So when we talk about hundreds of thousands, we really mean that. Those are people who are doing their jobs every month because that's what they have to get it done. They got to log into the workspace. It has to work, and they have to enjoy it.
Now, from an administrative point of view, how much of what they already know about administrating a large set of Windows desktops still applies?
Yeah, our goal is absolutely to have you not have to reinvent anything using workspaces. And we'll talk about Windows first and then Linux. But in the Windows space, that means the workspaces are domain joined. So you can use Active Directory Connector or Managed AD in the AWS product set to connect to your Active Directory. So your existing usernames and passwords and credentials, we integrate with your MFA solutions. So a lot of the MFA solutions on market just integrate straight in with workspaces. All of the tools that you would use to administer your Windows environments are just the same. I really have to kind of reiterate to people a lot, these are just Windows desktops. So it's either Windows 10 or Windows 7. Now we do use the server operating systems, Windows 2008 R2 and Windows Server 2016. If you purchase the license from us, if you use your own bring your own license option, then it's actually your own client OS imports in native Windows 7 or Windows 10. And all of the tools you might use like SCCM for management and patching and updates, all of those work on workspaces just like they would any on-premises installation of Windows. Now, on Linux, very similar story. So these are Amazon Linux based, so all of the existing things that you do with Amazon Linux work just the same on top of an Amazon Linux workspace.
This probably avoids a challenge I hear from a lot of customers, is that medium-sized customers, there'll often be thousands of people running Windows and a small elite group that's running Linux, and they always feel like they're somewhat not fully supported by IT. Does this address that challenge?
It does in a couple of ways. So first off, all of the Amazon Linux workspaces are domain joined, and so that means that you're connecting to the same corporate network infrastructure. And we found from talking to customers, a lot of times there was a huge amount of pain around onboarding Linux inside of their environment because of that one problem, which was how do I domain join it? How do I manage that user and auth story? So now they get all of that capability just included in it. We also include the patching. So we set up by default to pull patches from Amazon Linux in the upstream repositories, and it means that they don't really have to think about those pieces. We also narrow the scope of the Linux surface area a little bit. So it comes pre-installed with a set of Office and productivity applications and all of the core things that you need. And so to some degree, kind of removing some choice and kind of confusion because there's so many options in Linux has made it a little simpler for customers to use that product as a way to onboard Linux inside their corporate environments.
Do you see customers actually giving both the Windows and the Linux desktop to the same user sometimes?
I will say it's a little rare. We do see the inversion, which is that we see Windows users who get Linux desktops in the cloud sometimes, and we'll see Linux users who need Windows desktops in the cloud. But most of the time, there's the client side will be one, and then the thing they're connecting to will be the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk a bit about kind of, I'm not quite sure it's about performance, but I think it's maybe choice. This idea that I know you recently introduced in the client, the ability where I can go to the client and I can use a menu and I can scale the size of my workspace. I can add more storage. I can choose the amount of processors and memory and so forth. How are customers making use of that?
Yeah, this has been huge. So when we launched WorkSpaces, the way it worked was you had to decide up front what type of workspace would Jeff get, for example. So does he get a value or a standard or performance where there's kind of different CPU and memory and different price points for each of them? And so you kind of had to make that calculation up front about how much was Jeff really going to do in his workspace. And then just a couple of years ago, we launched the capability for folks to make those choices themselves. So the administrators could do that. So the administrators could say, after the fact, hey, I think Jeff's on the wrong type, and I want to move him from a standard to a performance. And so then users could ask their administrators for that assistance. Well, last year we gave the capability all the way through to end users. And so the end users now have the the ability to choose which type they're on from the client. And administrators can control which users get access to what and make some decisions there because there is some cost implication. But it's been huge. So the users are now totally liberated from the idea of having a specific piece of hardware that they're tied to for several years, which is what they've been used to with laptops and other devices for years, is that you buy that thing, you're stuck with it. And so now if you find that you've got a user set that needs more, just give them the capability. They can stand up more CPU, more memory, and more disk for themselves. And yeah, there's some cost implication of that, but the user satisfaction implication of it is way bigger.
It also means that IT doesn't have to maintain an inventory of a whole bunch of different desktops and laptops with different specs.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we've gone a long way on trying to help them understand spend. So we've got a cost optimization tool, for example, that will tell you whether you're going to be in a better state if you go to always on versus auto stop in terms of the financials. And now we have a lot of customers who are taking the APIs and usage information and applying that to saying, am I on the right types? So could I be smaller in terms of the footprint of how much disk I'm using or which type of bundle I'm using in terms of the different value, standard performance, and pro types.
Seems to me you've probably got maybe two different customer bases. Maybe one is just workspaces and another one has a bunch of stuff in AWS plus workspaces. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we do have customers that are just workspaces, so they need desktops in the cloud, and a lot of use cases, people wind up needing a Windows desktop for something, or they need segmented use cases for testing or other things. But we do have a lot of AWS customers, and one of our really common cases is for AWS developers, and so Linux workspaces have been a really big part of that. So they can stand up a Linux workspace, do development inside of the same environment where they're going to deploy, and so all of the networking is the same, all of the different environments they're going to run in from the Amazon Linux perspective are the same, access to all the same resources, the same credentials, and so it winds up being a lot simpler in that environment. And so Linux winds up being very integrated with us for the AWS customer base.
One question, maybe we can't talk about this, maybe we can. We often talk inside Amazon, either we're eating our own dog food or drinking our own champagne, depending on who you talk to. Is there anything we can share about how we use workspaces internally?
So Amazon internally uses a large amount of Amazon workspaces, and it's been great for us to learn and get that hands-on experience directly. It's really popular inside of Amazon for what we kind of call these edge of enterprise use cases, where you've got people that are going to be spun up or onboarded or offboarded quickly, folks that are maybe outside the company boundaries in a technical sense. So that might be folks that are outside counsel or outside consultants or outside translators, folks that get hired on for a period of time as consultants. They get access through a workspace rather than having their own laptop have access to our network, or rather than having us have to issue them a laptop. And so it's a really secure sort of a transient way to give access to people. But we use it in a lot of other places too, fulfillment centers and data centers, places where people have to roam around and be mobile and still have access to those corporate assets. Really, really powerful in that sense. So yeah, it's a huge thing for us, and we learn a lot as a service about Amazon as a large enterprise.
I'm sure my colleagues and I are just great at giving you lots of good feedback and not varnishing the truth. If there's something we want to
absolutely
want to be a little bit better.
Tough customers for sure, but definitely good feedback, and no doubt that they know exactly what they want. So we get a lot of direct information.
Excellent. All right. Did we cover everything that we would like to talk about today?
I believe we did, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming by.
Absolutely.
This is Jeff. I've been speaking with Nathan Thomas, General Manager of Amazon Workspaces. Thanks for watching. You can use the link on the screen if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Amazon Workspaces.